Flash Professional CC, the import of Photoshop and Illustrator files, has been streamlined and simplified. This lesson will explore this process. So here I have just a blank file opened up inside of Flash Professional. And if we want to import something from Photoshop or Illustrator, what we do is we go to the File menu, we choose Import, and then we choose Import to Stage or Import to Library. Normally, you're going to just want to import to Stage. So here we can see our Photoshop PSD, and if I double-click that to open it, we receive this little Import PSD to Stage dialog. So here we're able to make a number of different selections based upon this particular file. We can choose to flatten the Photoshop layers to a single bitmap, and in that case, it's just going to create a big bitmap for us that it's going to import into our project. But if we don't have that checked, we actually have a lot of other options to deal with. So we can choose how our layers are converted. Do we maintain editable paths and effects? Or do we just take each layer and create a single flattened bitmap of any of those effects? For text conversion, do we retain the editability of our text? Do we create vector outlines of those texts for Flash Professional? Or do we, again, simply flatten everything as a bitmap image? We can also convert the layers to flash layers, to a single flash layer, or spread each layer from our PSD across keyframes. And then since we are importing to stage, we're able to choose whether we want to match to the stage size or not. So what this is going to do is actually expand the stage size for us. So let's leave these at default and hit OK. And you can see that absolutely it did import everything from our Photoshop file. And it's actually created a large stage for us as well. Let's go to Show All, and we can see it's basically a CD cover layout. So if we actually go into our Properties panel for the document, we can see that the stage is now 2500 by 2500. And in our layers, we have layers for text, a layer for background, so forth and so on. If we open up this PSD, we can see the same exact layers here. We've got a layer for text, this masked image layer, and our background. And again, that's pretty much how this actually has come across here. There's our text, there's our masked image, there's our background, and so forth. So, what if we want to simply undo this? And what we'll do is File, Import, and instead choose Import to Library. So here we can choose that same PSD, and now our Import to Library dialog is a bit different. We can still flatten the layers, do layer conversion, text conversion, and convert the layers to flash layers, a single flash layer, or keyframes. But you can see here that the match stage size is no longer available to us. I'm going to cancel out of this. So the import of Illustrator files is very similar to PSD. Again, we go to File, and we choose Import, Import to Stage. Then we choose an Illustrator file to import. So this goes through and brings up a similar dialog. Import Illustrator to Stage. Here we can choose our specific artboard if we have multiple artboards. Just like you would have noticed inside the PSD, if we had multiple comps, we could actually select a specific comp to import. For layers, we can choose to maintain paths and effects, or to create a single flattened bitmap for each layer. In text conversion, we have similar options as PSD, whether to retain editability, create vector outlines, or to flatten the text into bitmap images. We can convert the layers again to flash layers, a single flash layer, or spread it out across keyframes. Now you'll see here we have an Incompatibility Report. And if we click this, it tells us a number of different things about the Illustrator file that won't come across that well when we import it into Flash Professional. We can also match the stage size here, as we did before. And we can choose to import any unused symbols in the Illustrator file. I'm going to hit OK here. So now it's imported, and it's not perfect, right? So if we look inside the Properties panel for our document here, we can see that indeed the stage has been resized for this particular file that's been imported, but actually a lot of different things didn't come across. And the reasons they didn't come across were expressed within that warnings dialog that we saw. If we open up the Illustrator file itself, we can see that there are definitely certain elements that are missing. And if we wanted to know why they're missing, we can always go back to that dialog. Making adjustments per those recommendations would allow us to import the file to have it look much more similar to the original Illustrator file than it does currently. So in this lesson, we've seen the mechanism for importing both Photoshop and Illustrator files directly into Flash Professional CC.